How much of what we call chronic pain and illness is actually the soul refusing to be ignored any longer? Hello, my beautiful soul seekers. This week, Jonathan and I are pulling back the veil on our own soul paths, tracing the ruptures, the mystery illnesses, the chronic pain, and long years of not knowing through to the moments that cracked something open and made it medicine. But first, if you've just arrived here, welcome. If you've come back, welcome home. And if you keep finding yourself here without subscribing, your soul clearly knows what it's doing. Honor that call and go ahead and subscribe. In this episode, Jonathan and I sit down together for our monthly free-flowing conversation, honoring the path of the wild sovereign soul. It's challenging to live in this crazy modern world. The wild sovereign soul path is what we know will help. We're exploring the truth about mystery illnesses and soul awakening, what it means to finally stop trying to fix something and begin to understand what it's trying to show you. Jonathan shares how decades of autoimmune conditions and brain fog became the precise material his soul needed to pull him out of his mind and into something truer and softer. And how the path of Christ consciousness, Gene Key 22, and a daily post-it note are currently where his work lives. I then trace my own path from the abandonment wound that set me against the archetypal feminine through a physical attack that began 15 years of chronic facial pain, through to my father's death, and then the morning a year later where that chronic pain simply vanished. And then how the gene key of the shaman had been waiting for me all along and is asking me to circle back to it again right now. So listen, if you spent years trying to fix something that nothing has touched, keep cycling back to the same pattern and wondering when you'll be finally done with it, or suspect the life you're actually here to live is still waiting for you to show up. And before we jump into all of that goodness, if you're struggling with the challenges of walking your soul path in this crazy modern world and your heart longs for guidance, kinship, and support, come join us in Unio, the community for wild sovereign souls. Unio is the living home for the wild sovereign soul path, where together we reclaim our wildness, actualize our sovereignty, and awaken our souls. You can discover more and walk with us by heading on over to bemythical.com/unio or click the link in the description. And now back to this week's episode. Let's dive in. Hello, here we are once again. Jonathan.
Hello. Here we are once again, Lian. It is beautiful as ever to be back.
Always feel weird welcoming you, even though I would normally do that. I always feel odd welcoming you to the show for some weird reason I've recognised, but I'm going to anyway. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Maybe I was just imagining us do it every morning when we speak. Just like, welcome, Lian. Welcome, Lian, to this new day.
I'm loving that. So, this is really, even though it's actually the month before last now, January's show between us was technically the first of a new show format, because we were really wanting to give context to all things Wild Sovereign Soul. It wasn't quite what we foresee this show becoming.
Mm-hmm.
But even this show is going to be slightly different in that there's a bit of scene setting to do, which we'll dive into next. And then from now on, after this show, there's going to be a way that we're going to flow. So this will be the sort of first of its kind, albeit slightly different for that reason. And where we were drawn to begin is to actually draw some dots between Be Mythical, where with the chapter that we were in the midst of closing, and Wild Sovereign Soul, because we realised after we'd finished last month's episode, I keep saying last month, you know what I mean, the last episode we did, we realised we actually hadn't mentioned Be Mythical really at all, which felt kind of dishonouring, apart from anything, but also potentially confusing for people listening. So we wanted to remedy that now. And The first thing to say is that we absolutely haven't turned our back on anything actually that we were talking about working with in our Be Mythical era. Every single thing, I can't think of anything that's not the case. Everything that we were talking about over the 2 years that we were being mythical is as true today as it was then. The move to Wild Sovereign Soul, and I'm not going to kind of go deep into that because, of course, that was what the entirety of our last episode was. It's much more a kind of deepening and a clarification of our work is why we've moved to Wild Sovereign Soul, but it's by no means saying that all things be mythical are no longer true and aligned. And I guess putting that into a more specific way of saying it, at the heart of Be Mythical is the notion that it's all about living our own soul's myth. That's what the work of Be Mythical is. It's not just this becoming an idea of what it is to be mythical. It's ultimately about our own soul's myth and to understand that, embody it, to live it. And of course, that's exactly what we're all about. We're all about awakening and living from soul. And it's also important to add that the focus on myths and archetypes that is, I guess, obvious by the name Be Mythical that has been part of our work still absolutely is. We didn't come up with this idea that working with myths and archetypes is incredibly powerful when it comes to living from soul. This is something that humans across time, the world over, have known is present in myths and archetypes. So that will continue to be absolutely intrinsic to the work we do. And so that, I think, leads us in really nicely into some of what we're going to share in this episode around our own journey of our living our soul's myth. But is there anything you want to say about everything I've just journeyed through in terms of Be Mythical, our soul's myth that you want to touch on before we start to dive into our own?
Not a great deal, no. I think you really summed it up. There isn't much more to say other than what you have said. And maybe I'll just add something that's there is the importance in the work we've always done is making that connection between this present crazy modern world and our soul's path and where we can orient ourselves on that journey. And when it comes to the past, or very much myths and these incredibly powerful ancient stories and ancient technologies, they are so often what's really aligned to help awaken us to our soul's path. And therefore, yeah, it's as essential as ever to honor what the energy of being mythical is, of following your own soul path and everything that's aligned to help support you on that long but very, very worthwhile journey.
Mm. You know what I'm like with words. I'm such a word geek. And your stumble there, where you said essential instead of essential, suddenly sparked this whole network in my mind where I was like, that's such an interesting stumble that that kind of prefix of in is obviously talking about something inner. And we talk about things like invocation. And then the idea of essential. And I was like, oh gosh, it's actually a really apt stumble that you made there, that this is everything we're talking about here is essential. And then I was thinking about the word essential and essence as in our soul. And I was like, oh, there was so much in that word that you said there, where it's like all of this is essential and insential to be embodied, to invoke our own essence, our own soul's essence.
Mm, it is indeed. I love that spark.
An insight into the workings of my mind right there. um, so As I mentioned at the start of this episode, our intention is to share on all kinds of things in these episodes we're going to do together. We've got a smorgasbord that we'll be picking from each time of like certain places that we're going to go. I mean, we are so sport for choice. We're going to be answering listeners' questions, questions from the team that we're going to like secret questions that we're going to ask each other. Um, I'll take on current events looked at through this soul lens. Um, we'll probably gesture to things like gene keys and astrology and human design. There's going to be, student and client case studies. So there's so many different things that we're going to be journeying through in these episodes. And it occurred to you earlier, perhaps it'll be useful because our intention is also to open the veil and share a bit of our own soul path as part of these episodes. Maybe it'd be first helpful to give a little bit more of the landscape of us and our kind of wider soul path so that going forward we can kind of drop in and go, okay, this is where I'm currently at. This is what I'm navigating right now on that path, which I think was it was a typical Lian and Jonathan discussion about that, wasn't it? It was like, sorry, what is the distinction you're making, Jonathan? And then we got to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense. This is what we're doing right now. And so I'm going to hand over to you first to, and again, within the bounds of what's possible in the time that we've got, to share what occurs to you would be um most useful, powerful for our listeners to know about your soul's path.
Yes. So, as you beautifully set up just then, there's you and I. First of all, just as the listeners will hopefully get a deeper sense, because I know we've done a good few shows now, but once we start to really, let's say, pull back the veil and really reveal the intimacies of our souls, and their journey, uh, lis- listeners and viewers will also really get a sense of the perfection of our souls and how, like you alluded to before, there's we have the perfect material for liberation for one another, which is perfectly challenging and beautiful, all in this same perfect. Can't think of the word to describe it. It's almost like a kernel of
Crucible.
crucible. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Which is something I will touch on with regards to my journey. Is my interesting relationship with these symbols we call words and recalling them at certain times. But
Which, of course, is the opposite to mine.
of exactly,
I mean, even the fact you're dyslexic and I'm hyperlexic.
exactly. So clearly, we're aware this is quite a quite the thing to reveal. And, we could probably record a 10-hour podcast and we'd still not be able to give you, a clear sense of everything we need to give you. So this is going to be an unfolding journey. And so hopefully in this show, we can start to give you a bit of a taste for that and share again a bit about where we are on that journey currently. And you'll be able to come along for the ride. And we'll be as vulnerable as we're called to be when it comes to honoring our soul path and being able to serve you as deeply and as powerfully and as lovingly as we can as a force for good in this world. And we're very much committed to that. Couldn't be more committed to that. So who knows where that's going to lead us or take us or ask of us. But we are here for it.
So, with all that all said, would you like to share your own soul path?
I will certainly give that a go. So there's a number of places I could start from, but probably I don't know if it's the easiest or the place I'm feeling called to start it from is when I really felt this this path of soul leading me somewhere, whether or not it was as clear. Clearly, it wasn't as clear as it is now, but that would have been when I really started to experience a lot of illness and many forms of disease and illness that um, the world at the time had no diagnosis or cure for. And nowadays they put a lot of those under the autoimmune conditions, basically, the ones that they say, oh, they're chronic. We don't know what those are. But I've had so many health conditions over my life that, it could take me an hour just to list the amount of things that have been uh, that I've been diagnosed with. And so this very much started, I believe, from a couple of events in my life. One of the key ones was around 8 years old when my mum and dad split up and my dad left. And from then, it was a pretty really more challenging than I believe I knew at the time. But from that point, a lot of these health conditions started to come surface, and it probably took about a year for them to really come to the fore, which is quite common actually in people when they receive it or go through a traumatic event. It usually takes some time for the dis-ease, the disconnection in the body to really take hold, and that's what happened for me. And I pretty much exhausted all possible avenues via mainstream medical hospitals and things like that. I then went private, and this went over many, many, many years. And at the age of around 15, I was rather stubborn and thought, well, I'm just going to try and work all this out myself. And then started on the path of understanding everything I could about the human animal, our body, the environment we inhabit, the universe at large. And that journey is one that's still very much going on. And classic thing of the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. But there's that has changed so much over the years. And one thing actually talking about like what's becoming present or what's feeling, there can be themes that unfold with the people we work with on their soul path, or just what we can feel in general. And one at the moment that's been quite persistent in its echoing and ringing is how we can resist letting parts of us die, the old parts of us die. And for so long, my soul was calling me into a deeper way of being or a different experience of life or a new me. But all I wanted was the old me. All I wanted was to get back and be healthy. All I wanted was to have all the energy or the freedom or whatever it may be. And I don't say that to say that, okay, for everyone in that situation, like that's not, that's the case for you. But so often it is a deep call. We can experience a rupture in our life that can take us down a certain path. For me, it was one of certainly of knowledge. I spent decades. I turned 30. I wish 37. I turn 47 next week, and so I've been on this for over 3 decades now. And there was a point at which it was an amassing of information, and then in the last probably decade, it's been much less about the amassing of knowledge and information, and much more in that deeper soul path. And for, as I said, so long, I was trying to heal myself. I was trying to heal something that I deemed to be broken, rather than the more that has illuminated itself to me over the years and the decades is that, no, this is perfect. As I alluded to earlier in the podcast with regards to me remembering words. One of the things I struggle with immensely is brain fog, headaches, migraines. I was fully symptomatic of a brain tumor at one point, had all scans and everything that's associated with that. But one of my key things that I'm called into is to get out of my mind. For me to be in my mind is deeply in misalignment with my soul. For me, it is much more about softening, coming into the body, being embodied, and of the heart and the soul. And in many ways, that's the case for all of us. But Lian's a great case in point, who has a level of brilliance that is her nature and that is meant to be utilized in all the wonderful ways it is. And for so often, I would try and fight against that. I'd be like wanting to get back to having this level of clarity of communicating and expressing myself. And yet I can see that that's an old part of me that is showing me a way to get out of my mind is just to surrender, to release control of trying to either get healthy or get back to the Jonathan I was, and to allow my soul to be called into the Jonathan I am becoming. And that's a very brief outline of my journey over 32 years, and some current things that are unfolding for me are, one of the best ways I can probably describe this is through Gene Keys. We've probably mentioned it on the show quite a bit, and it's there are many things out there that help not define you, but outline a lot of what energetically you've come into this world with, your gifts and shadows and things like that. And the Gene Keys we've both found to be incredibly serving for us. And my life's work on the Gene Keys is Gene Key 22, which goes from the shadow of dishonor into the gift of graciousness and then into the city of grace. And the city is like the highest state experience, this divine experience of being. And that my life's work is to find the sweetness in suffering. And it's very much connected to Christ. It's very, my specific one is I'm a 22-1 and my evolution is 47, which is transfiguration. So I'm very much on that journey of Christ consciousness and transfiguration, which, of course, is quite a big journey in and of itself. And it's one that recently, through the technology changes we've had with AI, I've been able to work with that in a way of, even this post-it is a great reminder what I have on my desk. And essentially it's a daily alignment reminder to help me align with Christ consciousness, with the path of Christ consciousness and transfiguration. And it is soften, surrender control, be humble, lead beside, not above, nothing to prove, just love. And I can't tell you how powerful that is for me in having those reminders right now, because it's what I need right now. 5 years ago, it may have been like, I'm sure it'd have been serving, but nowhere as powerful as what it is right now for me. And with that, I've been, there was a line in a soon to be released book by Richard Rudd, which is A Sage's Path, I believe. I may be getting that title not correct, but
That's right.
yeah, in there will be 370 odd or around 400 sutras, of which there's a bit of a sutra, like a poem, and then he describes your contemplation and your mythos. And in that, I have the only one out of nearly 400 that mentions Christ. And that really struck me. It actually brought me to tears, as I've been drawn very much to Hanuman, who I have on my desk. here, who many say bears and resembles a lot with Christ. And it's been a really interesting journey at the moment for me, opening myself up to it. Like many in the Western world, we have been conditioned in certain ways in our relationship to religion. And it's not necessarily religion I feel I'm being called into, but the teachings of Christ, the path of Christ consciousness, and down into paths of Gnosticism. Myself and Lian, we've had many conversations around this, how much of what my soul is calling me into aligns with Jesus Christ. And much of what Lian's soul is aligned with is Sophia Christ, that divine feminine and divine masculine. And there's there's been so much that's come up in that currently for me that's really brought me home. And so much to the point that I've got a level of um, attunement to how to what I'm being called into, that for Lian, for instance, and for other significant relationships, I can now present something to them that lets them know this is how you can help guide me on my soul path. These are the situations that come up for me. And in these situations, this is what's really helpful because of these things. And that's where that daily alignment reminder comes from. It's like a really condensed reminder of a much broader spectrum of things for me that I'm sure I'll go into much more detail in either future shows or in a bit, but I'm conscious of been speaking for quite a little bit of time. So I'm going to bring that to somewhat of a close, but that's what's alive for me at the moment. It is this path, like my wild sovereign soul path at the moment is very attuned and aligned with the path of Christ consciousness. And again, what that requires of me, what that calls of me. And the deeper and deeper I go into it, the more and more I can see, oh, that's so aligned. And everything, like, for instance, with Gene Keys, just matches up perfectly. Everything I could list 8 or 9 other philosophies or ways in which astrology is where we look at things and everything aligns. But more than anything, one of my gifts I should share is I'm claircognizant. So I have like a deep knowing of when something's so, and I can feel it in my knowings. And so I have this beautiful resonance of, oh, that is so. And after being many years on this path, that's a really, really helpful thing. It's almost like a plum or a pendulum kind of thing to test the alignment of something. And I've never felt more aligned. But that doesn't mean that because of my journey with my life's work, that being to find the sweetness in the suffering, to find the grace in the suffering. Ever since I first heard Ram Dass speak about there's grace in suffering, and then Richard Rudd later to kind of bring that to life in Gene Key 22, it's been such a at first an unwelcome truth that with time is something that graciousness has come with it, and grace at times as well. So that's very much a sort of condensed version of my soul path and kind of where it started and some of the things that are calling me into alignment at the moment.
There's it was so interesting listening to what, in many ways, is a familiar story. Obviously, we know each other well. We've shared our stories so many times with each other, and yet there were a couple of things that stood out to me as new. And the first was, I don't know that I knew before that your health issues began so early. I didn't think that happened until you were a teenager, and I think that's the first time I was like, "Oh." Um, I appreciated the more kind of what we might say is like the mental disease began younger. I had no idea that that was showing up on in other ways and other levels, so earlier in your life. So it was like, that's so interesting that I'd missed that the whole time. The other thing that what I'm about to say is not brand new, but it was just a clarity, which I was like, "Oh, yes, I wonder if this is so." When you're talking about, um, what we now call autoimmune conditions, these, in quote marks, sort of mystery illnesses that are really hard to diagnose, get to the bottom of, let alone, cure. I was like, "Hmm, I wonder if we could actually define those kind of illnesses as actually all being calls of the soul." I was thinking so much of the time that is so. So much of
Mm.
the time when we have autoimmune conditions, once we've journeyed deeply enough, we can then, and the same's true in my own story, is what I was also realizing, joining the dots, looking backwards, how there was this soul calling at the heart of that. That of course our modern medical system has no clue of, hence the struggle to diagnose, let alone help people with those conditions.
Yeah, definitely. I think you uh, are really on point there, as it's often spoken to about autoimmune conditions. It's the body turning against itself, or it's the body rejecting a certain part of itself, and therefore autoimmune by its very definition. It's like when you turn on parts of your body, you see your body as a threat, and the while we can't know this for certain, what we do know is the rates of those are increasing rapidly in these modern times. And yes, a lot
Mm.
of that is to do with our what we're disconnected from. But yes, I that feels so deeply true what you shared there. And then there are many ways in which spirit, God, creator, however you want to refer to this, organizing force behind life works with us to call us into our soul, to create that material for our liberation. And yeah, for my personal journey, and of course, the many people we work with autoimmune conditions, we can really kind of feel the truth in that and what you just shared.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing your story. Of course, we're only going to be able to scratch the surface, but I feel that that was a really beautiful kind of introduction to the book, the myth that is Jonathan. Um, so having just journeyed through yours, starting back where there's a point at which we can kind of go, "Oh, I believe this was an inflection point in my journey." And again, we often can't see this until we join the dots looking backwards. And I doing the same with my story. I think like with your journey, there was certainly a rupture that happened when my parents separated when I was 5. And because of the particular relationship I had with my father, it it created, in some ways, you kind of look at what was playing out and the people involved, and everyone absolutely doing their best. And so when you look back through the eyes of soul, you can see things that can sound extreme or making people wrong, or people shouldn't have done things the way they did, but there is something so pure and loving about being able to sort of look back at events in the past through those eyes, where you're like, this did happen, it had this impact, and I can also see the calling for me now, being able to look back at that. And so I'm saying that because, again, we can say, well, in this instance, my parents separated, and then my father had this very strong bond with, then not just left the family home, but actually left the country, sort of, set off wandering. And you know, now as a parent, I think, my goodness, how the hell did you think that was a good idea? And of course, for little Lee, back then, it was received in my system as abandonment, this, so interesting. I think I've never told this story with emotion, and it's just like the way I was about to describe it, it's just suddenly brought this like whoosh of emotion. It was like the sun that lit up my my dates are just set. And I I responded in a kind of, probably in the way that I just have described, as if my son had just gone out and completely, um, was just absolutely devastated, um, and was acting out in all kinds of ways at school with my mother. And at some point, my father came back, and my parents agreed, because of the state I was in, it would make sense for me to go to live with him, at least temporarily, until I'd kind of settled down. And that temporarily became our lives. And so I don't think, again, my parents ever envisaged I would stay with my father. I have a younger sister who stayed with my mother, but that became how we did life. So we ended up in this unusual dynamic where my father brought me up and my mother brought my sister up. There was a little bit of co-parenting, but not huge amounts, partly because my father's wanderlust meant that we then kind of set off together traveling. And so often we weren't in the same country or county as my mother. And the reason I've shared that with perhaps more detail than it needed is to share with you the way that I kind of created this, I guess, idolizing view of my father, and therefore, as these things do, the masculine, and how that became this North Star for me. Like that's everything that's good, everything that's valuable, everything that's worthwhile is my father, aka men, aka the masculine. And I had this very wounded relationship to the feminine, to women, to my mother, which wasn't really because of anything particularly obvious material. This was just, again, my soul already beginning its story in the way it needed to. And so I was an extreme tomboy, and really saw myself as, I can be as strong as a man, as good as a man, as this as a man. Interestingly, I just glanced at my the line that describes my evolution gene key, as you mentioned it earlier, which I'll come back to in a moment, because it really hit me, the this particular line just now. And so I had this very strong identification with not being the words I associated with the feminine, with women, like being weak, being needy, being vulnerable. And so I set about, as we do, building my identity through that lens. And then, of course, as life does, it gives us experience after experience that will bring us face to face with that, and often, certainly in our early parts of our lives, compounds it. So I had many experiences of, I guess, abuse at the hands of men, which again is so interesting that my core wound was actually around the feminine, and yet I had so many really, really damaging experiences at the hands of men. And yet this same story persisted, where it's just like, well, I'll just double down and be even less vulnerable, even less weak, even less able to be harmed. And then fast forwarding a bit, the part of my story that mirrors yours is, as you know, I experienced an attack that was physical and sexual in nature, and also I only really saw the importance of this later on. There was a part of this attack where I so interesting. I've just seen another part of it, which may or may not mention, but at one point of it, I thought I was going to die. The last conscious thought I had was, "I'm going to die here. There's no help coming. I'm going to die here." And I was then knocked out. But if there was a part of me that was conscious, I guess that's like dying. And so it was in some ways a kind of experience of dying without actually dying, because thankfully I did at some point, help did come. I opened my eyes, albeit at that point I had so much blood in my eyes. I also then thought I'd gone blind. Anyway, suffice to say, it was an intensely traumatic experience, um, which was compounded by a number of other aspects, which I don't have time to go into at the moment. But a month or two after that experience, I began having what was then at some point diagnosed as atypical facial pain, which was this constant burning, gnawing pain that began in one of my teeth and then over time started to expand. So it was the whole side of whole right side of my face. And just like you shared, Jonathan, I looked into everything I could do to get rid of this pain, to understand what this pain is, to the point where I had a root canal on the tooth it began in, and the dentist, my dentist, bless his heart. I often think of him because this story does not do him justice, because he really did try to say no to me. I'm not an easy woman to say no to. Um, he was saying to me, there is nothing wrong with your tooth. There's nothing wrong with the root. I'd had at this point, you can imagine, scan after scan. I've been to specialists and all the things. And he was saying to me, please, like, we shouldn't do anything with his tooth. And I begged him, please do a root canal. I have to know. I have to know. I cannot live with this pain without knowing. He did the root canal. Of course, he was right. There was nothing wrong with the tooth. So therefore, I now don't have a root in that poor tooth. And I still had the pain. Um, and it got to the point, and I think this was a bit of a wake up call, where I'd been prescribed anti-epilepsy drugs. And I think there was just something in me that woke up to, like, none of this is the answer. I don't even know what's wrong with me. I don't know what's going to cure it, but this ain't it. Like, it's time for me to just accept this. Not making those drugs wrong, or, in certain circumstances, they could be exactly the right medicine for the wound. They weren't the medicine for this wound. I had the wisdom at least to know that. So I learned to live with the pain, learned to accept it. And funny enough, I was only talking to a friend about this very recently, where she's now one of my closest friends. She didn't even know I had this pain. Most people in my life didn't, because I just never spoke about it. I just learned to exist with it just like you would a limb. And then, just like, again, I can only tell little snippets of my story, because each part of it could be an episode in itself. But I was, again, really seeing in your story and this idea of autoimmune conditions, or these mystery conditions, chronic pain like I had, that it's one way or another a calling of soul. And that only became clear to me after 15 years. And I'll do as quickly as I can. Some people would have heard my story before at much greater length. My father died under very sudden, tragic circumstances, and that was the beginning of me waking up to soul. In such an unexpected way. It's so interesting also how, of course, these bookends of my father going, and then my father going, and it what became it's what caused the wound, and it's also what allowed the wound to start to become medicine. And a year to almost the day after he died was that real kind of like being blown open to the truth of that, which also instantly cured the chronic facial pain, which at the time was such a mystery. It was like, I know I can feel what's happened. I don't understand. I can't put that into words. I can't. And I had this real strong sense of, this is something for me to share with others, to use in service. And yeah, I've got no words to do that with. And so for me, it's sort of mirroring your journey, but in a different way. It was like, I need to understand this just so I can help other people with this. It was less at this point about helping me. It was just being able to understand what had happened to me so that it could be used in service, which of course brought us together, and the rest is history. And so I'm just going to briefly touch on this through the lens of gene keys, as you have, because just as you say, this isn't about us having this kind of fate mapped out that we then are kind of constrained by, whether it be through the lens of gene keys, human design, astrology, or anything else. And yet there can be these really helpful way markers where it gives language, it gives ideas, it gives myths, it gives symbols to things that allow us to work more consciously with them, which that's absolutely been the case for me. And there's two gene keys, and I think this is probably the truth for almost everyone working with gene keys. It's often our life's work sphere and our evolution sphere that we are most that most resonate, we're most impacted by, we most live through, we most struggle with the shadows. Would you agree with that, Jonathan? I think
Well,
probably Richard Rudd says that.
I also just want to add that sometimes it can be the opposite. Where like with both of ours, evolution, which is essentially the evolution sphere, is what we're here to learn. And for both myself and Lian, it was like, yeah, it doesn't really resonate with me, that one. And then but as time has gone on, it's like, boy, does that resonate, and can understand why there was a part of us in resistance to really kind of being with it. So just to add that bit, that yes, most of the time everything really resonates, but notice the ones that are like, yeah, not sure about that one. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe a little tell that there's something more there.
Completely. My example will be so perfect to illustrate that with my evolution. So my life's work is Gene Key 48, and as you may have heard me share on the show before, I'm dyscalculic, so I struggle with numbers. And so there's this ongoing kind of running, I don't know if you'd call it a joke, between Jonathan and I, but also actually one of our beloved clients who's very into gene keys, where it's like the numbers mean nothing to me. So if you gesture and go, oh yes, because I've been working with my gene key 38, people expect me, because I've got a really good memory, they expect me to know what the hell I'm talking about. And if it's a number, I have no clue. It's like I've heard it for the first time ever. For me, you always need to say the city of that gene key, and then I'll be like, yes, of course, I know exactly where that is in your chart, and I know all about it, and I know how you've been journeying with it. Anyway, so for those of you that do numbers, it's my life's work is gene key 48. And it's a path going from the shadow of inadequacy to the gift of resourcefulness to the city of wisdom. And it's, as Richard Rudd, the creator, channeler of Gene Keys, says, it's one of the great feminine archetypes. So go back again to my story and my very great resistance to the feminine. Of course, my life's work is going to be embodying this great feminine archetype of wisdom, which is also known in the I Ching, which part of what Gene Keys is based on is the I Ching. The hexagram for this particular gene key is called the well. And so even if you think of the well symbolically, you can really feel, see, experience that that symbol in itself is kind of the quintessential feminine. And so I'm not, there's lots more I could say about this actually, but I'm going to pause. No doubt I'll say more in a future episode, but I'm going to move quickly on to my evolution gene key, which is gene key 21 for those who do numbers, and it's moving from the shadow of control to the gift of authority to the city of valor. Interestingly, going to what Jonathan was just saying there about the resistance, it's funny because with almost, I think, every other gene key, it's the city that I remember primarily what the name of that gene key is. So if I was to think of a certain gene key, I would name the city of it. The only one I don't do, and I actually to the point where I forget momentarily what the city even is my evolution gene key, which kind of says a lot, doesn't it? So the shadow of control is just like, Yep. That right there. And then I completely just hang on, what is the what's the city? And I get mixed up with my purpose. They're quite similar words, sort of, in fairness to me. So my purpose is the city of honor, and the city of my evolution gene key is, as I think I just said, valor. And anyway, this is one that I just, again, because it's the lesson I'm here to learn, I cycle round over and over again as if I'm there for the first time. And I actually listened, not even knowing that I was going to share this in today's show. I actually listened to it not once, but twice. The audio that Richard Rudd they're fabulous, actually, if you've not listened to those before. Richard Rudd has done an audio about each of the gene keys, which we've had the whole set now for a number of years and use them all the time personally and in our work, with the work we do. Anyway, I listened to it twice on repeat earlier. And there was a couple of things that stood out to me. Firstly, and you probably would have heard us say this before, every time you go back and either read the Gene Keys book about each of the Gene Keys or you listen to the audios, it's like, and I think Richard Rudd describes it, it's like the angels have been in and actually changed it since the last time you read or listened to it. It is literally like they have changed, to the point where I was going to say to you, Jonathan, has he actually updated them? And then you've updated them in our Dropbox folder? And I was like, no, it is just the fact that I'm hearing something. We haven't, have we? They are the same audios we've always had.
Exactly the same.
Yeah, but you can hear the question came because I'm like, I'm sure I've never heard this thing. But I've had that experience a number of times, including so this particular gene key is the shaman gene key. So it was a figure of a shaman that was used in the original woodcut for this hexagram. And Richard Rudd mentions the shaman at length in this particular audio. Anyway, I had listened to it, I'm sure, more than once in the past. And then as I had this is a whole other story you may have heard me share before. When I felt the call back now years ago to shamanism, I had so much resistance to it, so much resistance to it. Eventually got to the point where I submitted to the call. And then it was, so my very last time going into the woods where my shamanic training was happening. So this is after 3 years of training. The very last time I went into the woods, I was obviously in quote marks, happening to re-listen to this particular audio. And so this is like, finally, I've heard the call, submitted to the call, done these 3 years training, and then finally listen to this thing and hear him say for the first time, seemingly, this is the shaman gene key. And I burst out laughing like, oh my goodness, it's so funny. Like, I had no clue that this was there all along. I heard it for the very first time. Anyway, I just want to share something that I heard in it today, again, for the very first time, even though supposedly it was always there, which I don't really believe. And there is something so archetypally, just so true and so beautiful for all of us, actually. Again, of course, all of the gene keys are archetypes that are here for all of us. There's just going to be particular ones that are more going to be more poignant, I suppose, in our own path in that lifetime. And as a way of demonstrating this energy of valor as opposed to control of this particular gene key, Richard Rudd seemingly just in the moment has this film come to mind. And it's one that was when it was released in 1981. It's called Excalibur by Boorman. And the story is actually kind of mirrored in legends about Arthur, but this particular scene, I think, is, precise to the film, not necessarily to the legends. And so Arthur at this point is still, relatively young. He has Excalibur at this point, and he's fighting Urians, who is actually a real historical character. He's not just some of the characters we don't have historical basis for. The Urians we do. Anyway, so he's now shown up in this Arthurian tale. And he sees himself as having the birthright to be king. So they've been in this battle together, and then Arthur defeats him. And Arthur says to Urians, "So now come serve me. You know, I need good knights in my service. So come join me, be part of what we're here doing." And Urian's saying, "I won't serve a squire. You know, he's just a mere boy, you know, like he's not even a knight at this point, Arthur. No, I will not serve you." And then Arthur hands him the sword, hands him Excalibur, and says, "Yes, you're right, knight me." So he's put this powerful weapon, this fated weapon, in the hands of his enemy, knelt before him, making him vulnerable, opening himself up fully to the moment. What a brave act, what a valorous act. And then Urians is hearing the cry of his followers, kill him, you know, this is your time, this is your birthright. And in the film, I've just gone back and actually watched the clip myself. You can see him wrestling with this kind of, you know, what should I do? What's right? What's fated? I could literally, you know, cut off Arthur's head and this would all be done. And then he realizes, yeah, this is what's true, and knights Arthur, and then agrees to join him in service. What an incredible moment, archetypal moment of what valor. And in that moment is both Arthur and Urians, both are displaying valor in their own way. But this, again, going from this idea of control, where we're constantly protecting ourselves against life, we're gripping on tightly, to that moment where Arthur kneels, submits himself to whatever will come. That level of openness, my goodness, what a model, what an example. And then the line that stood out to me when you mentioned this earlier was on the 21st gene key. So each of the gene keys, which has like a single line that kind of summarizes that gene key. And the one for the 21st is the demise of hierarchy, which that scene speaks of so well. And my childhood notion of the masculine is better than the feminine, like, just it collapses all of that. So, I think I've kind of, to some extent, given a snippet at least of my own wild sovereign soul path, and also where I am. I guess I could give us more sort of material, real life examples of where I am, but I just felt like just sharing. This is very, like, as of this morning, how I've been journeying feels like for the moment enough. And of course, both of us will be sharing more as we continue to do these shows. Is there anything you would like to add or say before we move into the secret questions from the team?
No, I don't think so. I think, I think it's certainly time to go to the questions that neither of us know what we're going to be asked.
Okay, so do you want to go first? As I've been doing a lot of talking. Mind you, say no. I'm going to go first because it's you that will then talk in response. So that would probably make more sense. Okay, so the question is from the lovely, magical Michelle on the team. And it is, if you could bottle one of my, as in Lian's, qualities to dispense out into the world, what would it be? I'll ask that again. If you could bottle one of my, as in Lian's, qualities to dispense out into the world, what would it be?
What a question. So, first of all, I just need to say, Lian, Lian's soul ship has come laden with so many gifts. It's that's not. Let me just try and be with that and see which one wants to come up, because I'm straight away drawn to arguably one of the most powerful ones, but I'm just when I'm thinking through the lens of to offer that to the world, for them to taste that experience of that gift, it obviously changes it quite a bit. Oh, yeah, okay. It would be Lian's nature, of incredibly beautiful nature, of how much she loves herself and cares for herself. And it's very, very rare that Lian will ever be really hard on herself. Like, I can be brutal on myself, but that when I feel outward into the world of what would be like soothing balm for them, it would be for them to experience that level of self-love. And it's not that I need to say this to listeners because they'll know, but it's not like an inflated self-love. It's the most natural, beautiful, like Lian is the well, and it comes from the well to truly have that level of gnosis to it. Like, there is no place for anything that goes against the self. And so it would be for the world to get to experience what that level of self-love and self-care is.
Thank you. That's I was not imagining you were going to say that, but it makes
Neither did
so
I,
like
but that's what.
yeah, you're so right. Like as something to well, medicine for the world, as we say. Yeah, that would change so much. Mm, thank you. Over to
You're
you.
most welcome. So there is an equally amazing question, also from the very magical Michelle, and it is: what is the most valuable lesson you, then in brackets, Lian, have learnt by working together?
Hoo-hoo! Let me pause. So interesting. So if I can just restate that so I can hear myself say it, but also just check I've understood it correctly. So it's what's the most valuable lesson I've learned in us working together, you and I.
I believe so.
Gosh, it is so it's every time I think I know the answer, it's like I get taken another level deeper below that. And then I think, oh, this is the answer. Then I get pulled another level deeper below that. So I'm going to answer from what seems where I've got to, but I could probably sit with this and end up going deeper and deeper and deeper, but we don't have all day. So um, what occurred to me was how through our differences and the challenges that have come through those differences, but also through just the gauntlet that doing our soul work into the world provides to anyone who is brave and somewhat foolhardy, or sometimes seem to do so. Through those kind of combined tensions, I at times have behaved at my absolute worst. You have seen me, I would arguably yeah, I would say you've seen me behave my absolute worst than I have with any other human being. Um, and what I've learned through that is so many things actually, so it's hard to actually boil it down to one thing, but to be to have someone who is, and I guess there was a point at which we're like, oh yeah, okay, our souls chose that. Probably took longer for my human to catch up with that truth. But to have someone who's like, yeah, you were here doing this. We'll keep working through all of what we're here to work through. There is something so potent to like have the opportunity to be brought present to myself, or what's in the way of really me being myself over and over and over and over again, without really being made wrong for it. Like in the moment, we might be making each other wrong, but when we zoom out, we kind of recognize like this is all perfect too. This is all giving me that like humbling, excruciating opportunity to really see myself. And it's actually got nothing to do with you, Jonathan, and what's being um, provided to me to see, but then also work through together with you. And so, what's the most valuable thing I've learned? I think there is like there's no real way of us avoiding ourselves. Like we're going to meet ourselves over and over and over again on our wild sovereign soul path. And what I've learned is the greatest gift of all is to recognize it as a gift. And if you can find someone who is willing to walk that path with you, as indeed you are for me, Jonathan, my goodness, like run towards that, grab that with both hands, even and especially when you want to do the absolute opposite. So thank you for being that for me and for giving me that greatest lesson.
Mm. Well, it is an incredible honor and a blessing, and thank you for being that for me. And I'm sure over the course of these new shows, we'll share many more of these instances that come up. Some incredibly funny, some just very revealing in how perfect they are, and how that material is, again, some people will hear that and there'll be a deep ache and longing in their heart for that. Oh, I wish I had that. Oh, I want that. And but yet there'll be some that maybe have that feeling, and that person's already in their life, really frustrating and annoying them.
That's
And
the
pushing
trick,
the
isn't it?
buttons that only they
Recognizing
can
it.
push.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I know there's differences. I'm not trying to say everyone in your life is that person, but I can just appreciate. I was just feeling the ripples of that land into the many different types of beautiful beings on this planet, and feeling that. And it is the greatest of gifts. Again, when you can hopefully do what open to what we're here for, is to awaken people to their soul, the wild sovereign soul, that path. And when you have that and you can meet this from a sovereign place, when we can be with the perfection of, oh, of course, I'm in response, I'm in reaction, speaking of myself now, because Lian has just perfectly done whatever was needed to do to have that part of me feel what it needed to feel. It's a real blessing. And like I spoke to at the beginning, I've only recently created something for Lian, in what I believe are the last sort of vestiges of what I'm fine tuning in my shadow. That comes up a lot in response, and we had some incredible breakthroughs only last week, didn't we?
Mm.
Around this, and it is the gift that keeps on giving. And so, whoever you have in your life, if as long as this isn't a toxic, abusive thing, of clearly, I just want to caveat by saying that there's always the most beautiful opportunities to rise into sovereignty, center yourself into your soul, and to see the great gift and opportunity that is here, that you have chosen, that you are right where you need to be right now. And boy, is it worth it. But I'm certainly not going to sit here and try and say it's all amazing. Trust me, it is. but there are moments where it isn't. But we've put over 11 years of repetition into that. You imagine the perfect alchemy of polar opposites. We were 11 years plus deep into that journey, and it is still providing so much for both of us. So thank you, Michelle, for that, for those incredible questions. And I'm sure we'll expand much more on both of what we spoke to in the coming shows.
Yeah. I'm just actually going to briefly, before we close, I'm going to answer the question Michelle gave me for. I'm confused now. For you. I'm going to answer it about you. that was starting to mangle my mind then. So I'm going to say, if I could bottle one of Jonathan's qualities and dispense out into the world, what would it be? And I didn't directly speak about this, but it was kind of implicit in everything I just shared. You have, I would say, an exceptionally rare level of, it's a combination of almost like forgiveness, patience, understanding, devotion, where your ability to see that someone's behaviors, choices are coming from their wounding, are coming from a lack of consciousness, and even if they are, impacting you in some way, however great, your ability to not not react, not judge, not kind of, whatever would be the almost like normal response to that. um I've seen over the years, and I remember when we very first met, you were telling me, I'm not going to go into details right now, but you were telling me of kind of your experiences with one of your ex-girlfriends. And I was like stunned. And I'm actually a really forgiving person myself in my own way, but it's a different quality to this. Like when you were describing what happened, and you weren't doing it in this like way where you're trying to make yourself out to be saintly. In fact, I think if anything, it was kind of like you were almost a little bit like, oh God, like what I did in this particular scenario. But I was so struck by your just absolute acceptance and love for that soul. And so this is a long way to say, I think your ability to see and love the soul in a person, despite beyond however their behavior is showing up in the moment. My goodness, I suppose in some ways we could say, I've got that ability of great self-love. You've got that ability of great love for others. My goodness, if we could pour that medicine out into the world, it'd be a very different place. So that's what I would love
Beautiful.
to close this conversation with, because it felt an important. Yeah, I really wanted to just let people know who Jonathan really is, and I think that's one of those qualities that anyone that gets to know you even a little would experience.
Why, thank you. That is I feel very touched, and that's a beautiful to receive. And I agree with the polarity there. I actually felt that earlier when we were speaking. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I can kind of feel how, that inward versus external. And so, thank you for blessing me, and hopefully in some way blessing the listeners with that too.
So, anything you would like to say before we close? We've
Uh,
gone on for much longer than planned, so I think this is our last exchange before we close on this month's episode. So, what is
yeah,
there to be
indeed.
said?
And in some ways to plan, as I, in some ways, I'm the one that was saying at the beginning, okay, let's plan, let's get a framework so I don't need to overthink this. And today's like, let's take away the plan. Let's just have him go however he wants to go. And so I feel it's honored that. And knowing that we have the frequency of these shows coming up, and knowing that they being you, the viewers are going to get more and more of a sense of not just me and Lian, but what we're here to do, and our individual soul paths, and also those of the people we serve. It feels it feels like a beautiful start. And there is, just to say, there is so much more to come, so much more to come. And we now have the outlet, the amount of conversations we have, and we're like, oh, it'd be so good if we had this on, recorded this, or we could get this out on a podcast. And this is precisely what this show is for. And so, I look forward to us being able to deliver that to you. And with that, I feel complete. And anything you would like to say in closing?
So what just came to mind, I was thinking, why did this come to mind? And I think I have the answer to why it came to mind. So last night, my family went to go and see Ray, the artist, in concert at the O2. And she was brilliant. Um, and she was so authentic. I mean, talk about people kind of like that really have that awakening of their soul. It was so present at various points, not just musically, but the way I've never seen an artist engage with the audience in the way that she was. It was, just something. And cut a long story short, at one point she was, um, I think she's written a whole song about this, but she was talking about I think it was her mother. Yes, it was her mother, would always say these four words: it's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right. And she had the whole audience just say those words on repeat over and over again like a chant. It's gonna be all right. And I was like, why has that just come to mind? And it's this. If someone's listening to everything we've talked about myths and legends and, all kinds of these, like, big stories and all the things we've spoken about. And when we're in a situation where life feels hopeless, life feels so hard, it's so easy to lose touch with the the greater meaning behind all of this. We can be I mean, really is a disconnection from that, which is totally understandable. It's not at all to say, how silly that is. It's to say, like, this is the game that we're playing down here. It's like we'll forget over and over again why we're here. And so there's a couple of things I wanted to end with. One is, whoever you are, whatever you're going through, it's going to be all right. You will remember again. You'll remember your soul again. You remember that you're not alone. There is endless support, guidance, love in so many different ways, just waiting for you to see it, open to it,
To remember.
experience it, to remember.
Mm.
And this really, I guess, brings us to why we do the work we do in all the different ways we do it, is because sometimes that help, that guidance, that support, that love comes in human form, which of course is what everything we do with our students and clients. So yeah, come join us in whatever way is right for you. If you're not already with us, there's a number of different ways. If you're listening to this now after hearing my intro right at the beginning that I'm going to record in the future, one of the ways is to join us in Unio, which is at bemythical.com/Unio. And it is a community of wild sovereign souls journeying this path, our own path, but this shared path together back home. And then we also have, which we went into more detail in our last episode together, so just going to touch on this very briefly. We have got an upcoming, probably 3-month Wild Sovereign Soul course, which again is all about guiding people to awaken and go deeper. Many of the people joining us already would say, I'm absolutely have set foot on my own wild sovereign soul path, and this is an opportunity to go deeper for those people. So we'll be doing that at some point over the coming months, and we don't yet have. We've got so much going on in the background as we do the final stage of the rebirth to Wild Sovereign Soul, but you can register your interest at bemythical.com/WSS. And again, this isn't about me, trying to do a little nice sort of sales message at the end. It's really to say, genuinely speaking, you don't need to do this alone. This is, again, the heart of the why we do what we do is so that we can all walk the heart path home together.
Beautiful. And I'll just add a slight little bit to that is so often, so often in this modern world, we are sold the dream that there's some place we'll get to, and then that's it. We're free. We've done what we need to do. We're home, and everything will unfold from there. Where the journey of one's soul never stops. Never stops. Often if someone asks us, how long will it take for me to connect with my soul? It's like, well, how long? 30, 40, 50 years? We'll often have people come to us in their 40s, 50s, or 60s and say, why is it taking this long? Because it takes that long. And in the same way with the gene keys that we've mentioned often today, this is something you keep cycling around. You keep cycling around and coming home. It's the same with Wild Sovereign Soul, with reclaiming your wildness, actualizing your sovereignty, and awakening your soul. That is a cycle. It's not a one and done thing. And so part of why we were called deeply into this rebirthing and rebranding as Wild Sovereign Soul is to create a journey that will at least be once, maybe even twice a year, where you can cycle through everything that we do, and you'll get to do that with other like-souled people. And I say that because it's something that I know can maybe come up for a number of people who've maybe done work with us before and think, I kind of have that down, where it's just like saying, I've got the gene keys down. I don't need the G keys anymore. It's like, no, life is a constant cycle, and you're always evolving. And the more we get to journey inward and outward into the modern world through the Wild Sovereign Soul path is so incredibly precious. And that isn't therefore, I'm trying to say, therefore you need to go do this. I just want to speak that out there because it isn't spoken of enough. We just seem to have this sense of, I need to do something and then I'm good. And that may well be the case when it comes to passing your driving test or something like that. Of course, if there's many of those things in life, but when it comes to the journey of the soul, and I don't say that as almost like a burden of it'll never end. It's the most beautiful journey there is. It's the most worthwhile thing anyone can devote their life to, but it is a long journey. And it is one that goes round and round and round with the cycles of the sun until we're blessed to evolve into wherever we're meant to go next. And I just felt called to speak into that at the end.
It just, I was looking out on my garden that's coming alive to spring at the moment. I was like, yeah, just like you're saying, if you are a gardener, you're not really looking for that one and done. You come back over and over again. Another year of I've just brought out all of my pots of bulbs, and I've yet to deadhead my lavender, and I'll be doing the same again the next year and the next year and the next year. If
Beautiful
I'm graced
example.
with those years, you don't orientate it as something to finish.
It's such a great metaphor analogy because what a gardener or anyone brings is curiosity. It's what's new, what's going to be different. Whereas where we can often approach it is from a place of fear, and curiosity being the antidote to fear. I thought that was such a beautiful example of the garden, because I felt you for a moment going out into your garden and changing seasons and just curiously, oh look, oh wow, oh, and then like the journey that beautifully takes you on. So I love that you shared that.
Mm. Well, this is us done for another month. And thank you, everyone that's listened. This has been a long one. I don't imagine future ones will be quite so long, but again, there was a bit of scene setting that felt important for us to
Mhm.
do. And thank you for being with us as we shared our own souls. I'm sending you so much love.
Thank you. Journey well, soul seekers. Journey well.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Here are some of the big takeaways. Autoimmune and mystery conditions so often have a soul call at their root, as you heard us reflect upon. And there comes a point where stopping the attempt to cure them and beginning to understand what they are communicating can change everything. The gene key spheres of life's work and evolution tend to be precisely the ones we most resist, forget, and keep cycling back to, as though they know we are not yet ready for their full power material for liberation. And then they simply wait until we're ready. When two people with genuinely polar opposite natures commit to using each other as the material for their liberation over years and even decades, what unfolds is certainly not always comfortable, but is, without question, the work. If you'd like to hop on over to the show notes for the links, they're at bemythical.com/podcast/539. And as you heard me say earlier, if you're struggling with the challenges of walking your soul path in this crazy modern world and long for guidance, kinship, and support, come join us in Unio, the community for soul seekers. You can discover more and join us by hopping on over to bemythical.com/Unio now. Let's walk the path home together. And if you're called to go even deeper on your Wild Sovereign Soul path, come join us for the upcoming Wild Sovereign Soul Journey, a 3-month immersive initiatory crucible into becoming a Wild Sovereign Soul. Press your interest at bemythical.com/WSS. And if you don't want to miss out on next week's episode, head on over to your podcasting app or platform of choice, including YouTube, where we are in full Technicolor, and hit that subscribe or follow button. That way, you'll get each episode delivered straight to your device auto-magically as soon as it's released. Thank you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. I'll catch you again next week. And until then, I'm sending you all my love and blessings as you walk your wild, sovereign soul path.